Hey, this is Joe Castiglione, and you're listening to Not Another Sox Podcast. Can you believe it?
A little Irish in your blood, a little Polish in your name, a little Boston in your attitude, just the way you were raised. A little Irish in your
Buenos noches, amigos, and welcome to a special episode of Not Another Sox Podcast here. I am Jack Webster. No Ian Dorn today, but special guest Jahmai Webster from NESN. Everybody should know him. Jahmai, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself for maybe the zero people that don't already know who you are.
Hey, what's going on, Jack? A lot of people don't know. I guess the first thing is that you and I are cousins, man.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
We got the Webster name going on for us, but no, it's been good, man. Thanks for having me first and foremost. I guess we've been trying to do this for a very long time, so it's glad that we're able to get on the books. But my 9 to 5, as you might put it, is working Red Sox sidelines during the season, during spring training, and throughout the year. So that's where a lot of people can find me or maybe familiar with some of the work that I've done. But been at NESN since 2016. It'll be 9 years in October, and originally was hired as a host and reporter. So back then we had a news program, and I covered everything, from Celtics to Bruins to the Patriots and their Super Bowl runs, and Tom Brady during his time here, and then kind of transitioned about the start of the pandemic, essentially, to just baseball full time. I'd been a part of the broadcast previous to that, but became just my full time role, and the only thing that I did since 2020. So it's crazy, man. Coming up on my 5th full time season as just strictly the Red Sox sideline reporter. So excited about this year, and it's been an incredible ride so far. To this point, NESN has been the best job that I've ever had. Just so much career growth and opportunity, and looking forward to this season. But yeah, been around for a little bit. Had a few stops previous to that, but almost a decade at NESN now in Boston.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, fans obviously know you, they love you. So it's been crazy. It's been 5 years now, like you're saying, since there was a little bit of turnover there the last few seasons before that. So it's nice to actually have somebody that's been here for a few years and interacts with the fans great. So definitely appreciate you coming on. We actually have a special today. We're going to start rolling out some of these player profiles throughout the year. But this is one I've wanted to do for months now, as Jahmai was talking about. I think we messaged you all the way back in November, but timing ended up working out well. Because we're going over the story of Pumpsie Green, which a lot of Red Sox fans might be somewhat familiar about, may have just heard the name, especially during some of the Red Sox pregame stuff or around Fenway or on NESN as well. But a lot of people don't really know the full story behind it or a lot of the context of what he went through at the time. They just knew he was the first Black player on the Red Sox. But we'll get into, everything here. But the thing that stood out for me, and the reason we invited you on, is because it was, one day after a Sox game, a few hours later, I actually saw that you got an opportunity to interview him before he passed in 2019, I believe. So I thought, it would be a perfect opportunity to have somebody that obviously, is very familiar with the story, got the opportunity to, sit down with him for a while here. So, right off the bat, is there anything that, stood out to you when you actually got the opportunity to, interview him and sit down with him?
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned that you wanted to do this about Pumpsie Green, and I had to look back and think, how long ago was it? And it was 2019 that I went to his house in El Cerrito, California, which he had lived in even when he was, coming up through the ranks. He had been in this house in the Bay Area. He was born in Oklahoma City, or a small town in Oklahoma, and then his dad moved to California and was a great athlete too in his own right, but obviously had a family to provide for, and kind of got away from the athletics and then focused on, creating a living for his family. So interesting enough, and it's actually something that I didn't even ask him about when I was thinking about this, and I thought about it in my research, but it wasn't really not necessarily significant to the story, or it would have probably got dropped off at the cutting room floor. But like, super athletic family, like I said, and his dad, like his brother, is one of the top 60 players all time for the Dallas Cowboys, and he was
Oh,
a great
really?
basketball player too. He got drafted in the NBA, but never played really, football prior to that, and was a college basketball player at Utah State, and is in their Hall of Fame. And great NFL player, had like a 12-year career too, but and won some Super Bowls and championships. But I didn't ask him about that coming up really, but it would have been pretty interesting just to talk about his origin story. But yeah, I mean, Pumpsie, when we talked to him, he was 85 years old, had slowed down significantly, and had probably been, I think, 10 years before the last time he had been back to Fenway. So 2018, the year prior, the Red Sox did honor his breaking the color barrier as a memorable moment, as they do when they induct a new Hall of Fame class. So his daughter came down and his granddaughter in 2018 were able to be honored and kind of roll out the red carpet for them. So that was great for their family to be able to experience it, and him obviously being enshrined there now for all eternity. Even after he's gone, it's still that legacy that he built. But I guess the first thing, which was kind of striking and memorable, was like how sharp he was still, even with like declining health. Like, great storyteller. It was incredible to just sit down with him and hear, and the fact, for me especially, being an African American myself, and sitting down with somebody who endured such hardships and tragedy, the fact that people can hate you for the color of your skin or not even know you and already have this prejudgment for who you are or the type of person you are, I think is just unfathomable. And I even told him at the time, just to be having this conversation with this living, breathing piece of American history, which is, what Black history is. And like, he could have been my grandfather, and like, it's that recent in our history in America, but it also feels so far away, but you can reach out and touch it. And this is somebody who was a walking monument for baseball. And, Jackie Robinson might've been the first to break the color barrier, but Pumpsie was the last. And, it was one of those things where it sucks that he had to endure this, but also like it just showed kind of his strength to be able to do it. And, even to that moment, 85 years, almost 60 years, because he passed away. And that's why we did the story, I believe, because it was coming up on the 60th anniversary of him breaking the color barrier for the Red Sox. So 4 days prior to the 60th anniversary, he passed. And it was coming up on the 60 years of that date. And even that point, he still was like, I hated it. I hated all of it. I didn't want to be, this trailblazer. I didn't have it out for me to have this goal of, being the guy who broke the color barrier for the Red Sox. I didn't want any of those things attached to me, which I thought was incredibly interesting. But also, he understood like the responsibility of it all. So he said, all these years later, like, I get it, but still, I just wish I would have never had it. So we called him, and it was a phrase too that I think we picked out of a newspaper, that he was the reluctant pioneer, because he didn't want to do any of it. But this was the kind of the burden that he had to carry, and which is part of his legacy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That definitely came up when, I was doing research about it. He was obviously very humble about it. He treated every game like opening day. And an interview that I saw with him, he was definitely, not trying to be the first Red Sox or Black Red Sox player. And at this point, there was many Black athletes in baseball. Literally, we were the last team to integrate full decade after Jackie Robinson. I believe
12 years.
It was actually 12 years after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Years.
I mean, Willie O'Reese was already in Boston for this for the Bruins at that point too.
Right. So I mean, the other teams were a lot more progressive in regards to what you just said. The Celtics had integrated 1953 with Chuck Cooper, Willie O'Ree with the Bruins in 1958, and then several years later, here comes the Red Sox. And by the way, it's not something that they were like, hey, we should go out and do this. Like they were the last team. Like there was a state probe that was ran because he had gotten cut earlier that spring after not making the team, after being the best hitter statistically, and really playing shortstop all over the field. His versatility was on full display, and he was the best hitter during spring training. Had the best spring of his entire life that year. Hit over 400. I'm talking about beat out everybody. Ted Williams was on these teams, hit better than him, and he got cut, sent back to the minors during that year. So everybody in Boston, even the sports writers, everybody at that time thought that he played well enough. He had proven himself that he should be given this opportunity. And when he got cut, it was this whole big firestorm back home in Boston. And Mike Pinky Higgins was the manager. You know, he had made some alleged racist statements to some of the writers back then, you know, saying things like, as long as I'm the manager, no N-word is going to be, you know, on this team, that type of stuff. But it wasn't until he got fired during that season in 1959 that Billy Jurgens was hired, and then just 18 days after that, Pumpsie Green was called up and made his major league debut. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that's something that we pointed out too during the story after our sit down. So it was incredible, but it was too late. And like I said, there was a state probe, the NAACP and some alliances in Boston questioning the Red Sox fair employment practices. Because, mind you, also something that was striking to me that I found out. We interviewed the gentleman who led this probe. His name was Walter Carrington. And he told us in the midst of his investigation, not only did they, you know, feel like Pumpsie Green was not given a fair shake, but also in their investigation of the Red Sox at this time during the late 1950s, they found out that they did not employ a single person of color from top to bottom, and even the most menial position. I'm talking about the janitor wasn't even a black guy or a person of color. So they didn't hire anybody. So they had like a handshake agreement because during this probe, the Red Sox came out and they said, we can't guarantee that we're going to bring up a black player to play, but we'll try to make some adjustments to what we're doing. So first organization to actually be forced to integrate, essentially, and that came much later for Pumpsie. But so many interesting tidbits came out of this, and just shows the sign of the times and what kind of ownership of the Red Sox kind of viewed things in the managerial position as well, about how much of silo was being put up and them trying to gatekeep even the organization to that point from any person of color.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You always hear about Tom Yawkey and his obviously mixed history in Boston is the probably kindest way to say it. Obviously, throughout the years, the current Red Sox ownership has very much acknowledged the racist history of Boston and the Red Sox, and I think have done a pretty good job of actually bringing a light to the history of the organization. So, you know, you can be as critical as you want, not trying to get you in trouble with your bosses or anything like that either. But to their credit, you know, this was a really large stain on the organization for many, many years. They had multiple opportunities to sign black players, including Jackie Robinson a few years before he signed with the Dodgers. And there was a few other African-American players that also tried out and ended up in the major leagues as well. But apparently, you know, the whole tryout was just for show. Like they wanted just to say that they were doing it just so that way, you know, keep the people happy. But the fact that, you know, it was a full decade after they saw so many teams succeed with black players on their clubs. You saw a few teams do it pretty much immediately after Jackie Robinson, and the Red Sox weren't only the, you know, last team to do it, but by the sizable few year gap too. I think the previous team to integrate was actually the Yankees in 1955. So you had a gap for a while where, you know, you weren't putting together your most competitive team possible just because literally the color of their skin. Everybody knew at that point that they were, you know, more than capable on and off the field of being productive players, good human beings, everything like that. So, the fact that, over the last few years, the Red Sox have kind of, renamed Yawkey Way and kind of gotten away from some of that, I think actually, kind of proves that, it's more than just saying like, oh no, we're sorry that all this happened. I think they're actually trying to, not correct the wrongs. That would be the wrong way of putting it, but, try to actually have some improvement for the current fan base. And so that way, fans learn and can accept and hopefully, become better because of it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, it's something that you just mentioned here too about the sham tryouts, basically, that the Red Sox did hold at that time. And Jackie Robinson obviously went on to break the color barrier with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. But in 1945, he did try out with the Red Sox. And, he basically said afterwards that it was a sham. It was not really giving himself a fair shake. But it should also be pointed out, like, as you said, like, this was a different ownership than what's currently in play for the Red Sox. So this is not, a John Henry or Tom Warner thing. They came much later. And, they have shown a much more progressive approach to being inclusive of people of all walks of life. For some people that may be a little bit too much, but I think, that's the world that we live in, that we share the world with everybody. So, if you're not hurting anyone, then you should have the responsibility to live the way you want. That's just kind of how I view things. And the only judge really is the man upstairs. But getting back to just the ownership and what that was, I think Gordon Eads was the Red Sox team historian at the time. He also kind of made the point that it's not so much important about, was Mike Higgins a racist, or Tom Yawkey and his questionable approaches to race and ethnicity, but it was just the indisputable facts that the Red Sox hadn't integrated. They didn't have a player of color on the team, and it came 12 years after Jackie Robinson had done it, and several years after the rest of the league had, caught up with the times. So I think that stain is on them forever, but to the credit of this ownership, they've done a better job of, trying to make the ballpark a more welcoming environment. I mean, even Boston gets a bad rap for that as well. And in the 1940s, especially, it was actually seen as was something that we had discovered, one of the more progressive cities in the Union because of some of the laws that had been put in place. You mentioned earlier about the Celtics integrating and then the Bruins integrating. So it was probably a destination city for somebody of color at that time wanting to come and at least be treated fairly. So with the Red Sox kind of being behind the times, it was just a horrible look. And like I said, they were essentially forced by the state probe to integrate. But, Pumpsie had some great friends here, Bill Russell being one of them. He talked about going over to his house all the time and having him and his wife Marie over, and just being that sounding board because he understood what it was like to play here, and he had a love-hate relationship with the city, and even towards the end of his life, about not wanting to come back to Boston and be a part of a lot of the things because of the way that he had been treated as not only a coach here but a player, or not only a player but a coach as well. So. The history is hard to erase, but I think people have been doing their best to try and, change the narrative nationally about, what Massachusetts is like in Boston more specifically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you always hear, comments online about Boston being a racist city, and, some of that's warranted. There obviously was the whole Adam Jones incident of the last few years that the Red Sox ownership fully acknowledged and, apologized to him for and everything. And even then you saw, fans be like, oh no, that didn't happen like that. I've never heard it at Fenway. So there's no way this is true.
Yeah.
And what do you think, like, fans today, can really like take from this in order to, not like, I'm not trying to like virtue signal or anything like that, but like, what do you think could change in Boston even today when it comes to that type of narrative?
I mean, it's just, first off, just because you didn't hear it doesn't mean it didn't happen. I think that should be clearly stated. A lot of people, you can't be at all places at all times. Nobody's omnipresent, but somebody else's experience should not be discounted. And as you said, the Red Sox came out and said, yeah, this is true. We've dealt with this for several years, several different occasions. They're just not publicizing it every single time. But it's a passionate place when it comes to sports, for sure. And when the stakes are raised, it's even more treacherous landscape when you step into Fenway Park, and especially when they're playing, a heated rival like the Yankees or something. It's tough to be in some of those places in the bleachers if you got kids because they're going to learn some new words. And if they aren't hearing them already at school, then they're going to, hear some things that they may not be exposed to at home. But I guess, parents got to be mindful of that as well. You can't control everybody. When you put your kids out into the world, the foundation of who they are as people and, their character is molded inside the house before they leave. So a lot of things people are going to be exposed to. You hope to, kind of control some of that and let kids be kids for as long as they can. But again, some things you just can't control with other people's behavior or how they act. But I think they do a good job of, keeping things, keeping it to be a family atmosphere at the ballpark for the most part. And it can always be better and be improved. But it's just, I think the sports is what unites us, and it's a great watch, and it has been, especially now since the implement of the pitch clock. The game's a lot faster, easily digestible. So they've been creating some, memorable environments for families to come out and enjoy games, and I think it's been a great thing. Like, my kids love coming to the ballpark, and they love seeing Wally more than they love seeing Devers hit a home run, which is crazy. But I think they have so many different activations and things across the ballpark that make it family friendly, and they've been doing a good job about that over the last several years.
No, absolutely. And just to backtrack a little bit too, you kind of mentioned the city of Boston being a little bit more progressive even during while all this was going on. And I think that a lot of the fans were at the time even upset that they weren't putting their best foot forward. Obviously, they didn't know that they're in the middle of an 86-year drought, but even it was probably about 50 years since they won a championship, about a full decade since they made it to the World Series too. And when Pumpsie was, finally promoted back in 1959, he got a standing ovation, his first at bat when he was being pinch hit for.
Yeah.
And I think that really kind of speaks to, a little bit of what the actual, narrative at the time was, or not really narrative, more perception with everything, with the fans too. They wanted to see this change. Maybe not every single person, but I think, the idea of just the entire city, like, being against it just probably wasn't even that true. Like, they wanted to have a winner more than, just not have any black players on their team.
Yeah, 100%, which is also kind of what made this such a big story too at the time when Pumpsie had gotten cut, because as you mentioned, like, the Red Sox weren't the Red Sox that we know today, or maybe not in recent history, but the start of the turn of the century in the 2000s, the curse-breaking team, and dominating with the 4 World Series for this ownership group, and their last one in 2018. They weren't this Red Sox that we know today, of being one of the premier organizations in Major League Baseball. So fans, to your point, they wanted the best players to be a part of what was going on because they thirst for that championship, and Pumpsie was one of those guys during this particular time. So it was surprising that he got sent back down to the minors, mind you, after he had spent 6 years already toiling through the minor leagues and not getting his opportunity. It was like, what more do you want to see from this guy? He's hitting 400. He's a game changer. His defense is shored up. because he had some question marks about that, and he can play all over the field, essentially on the infield. And his position is shortstop right now. So fans wanted the best players. They didn't necessarily see him as, being the pioneer that he turned out to be and being the guy who's going to break the color barrier. But they thought of the 25, he was one of them, you should build a roster with. So I think that played into the part when he finally got called up and he got that standing ovation, and they had a section for Black Bostonians out there as well, which he remembered very vividly about the love that he was shown when he did make his Fenway Park debut, because he did debut on the road when he first came in for the Red Sox. But when he came back to Fenway, he told me about the story of them having to rope off a section, which was an incredible thing for him, and he really realized the magnitude of it. But yeah, Boston sports fans, it hasn't changed, especially with Red Sox. They just want the best players, and Pumpsie was one of those guys. So it was good that he finally got his chance. And what came along with that was, being a history maker, in addition to living to his athletic dream of making it to the major leagues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's not like one of those things also where Pumpsie came up and everything was just, hunky dory and, out the road too. There was still several years, I believe, before they even drafted a black player. I think it was right before Jim Rice even. So even still, they were obviously forced to integrate both on the team and in actual Fenway Park and the organization and everything. But I don't think the true attitudes truly changed until we saw ownership change many, many years later. So I think, something like that contributes just as much to any other curse than trading Babe Ruth, 50 years before that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you mentioned Jim, who's the legacy of Pumpsie Green, and Mo Vaughn, Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr. They're all part of it, after Pumpsie, because he was the first, but he certainly won't be the last. And we've seen that. And, I remember also during a Black History special that we had at NESN, we were telling these individual stories of great Black athletes in Boston. And we did a quick little vignette, with Mo Vaughn, and he talked about that, about how Jim took him under his wing, as well as Ellis Burks at the time, huge person in his life as far as navigating Boston and what it's like to be a major leaguer here. And all those guys had story of somebody who had brought them along the same. So it's all connected, and it's not one person's journey, even though somebody might be that particular person walking the steps. The legacy is what comes after, and, how you created an environment really for more people to be able to enter the door. So we saw that with Pumpsie, and it was great. It was great. And it's crazy the fact that, I was the last person to have him on the record in his life to do an interview. And, I take a certainly amount of pride with that. And I wish he got more recognition, and I was hoping that our story would do that. But shortly after we went to his home that summer, maybe a couple weeks later, he was already going, having some health complications and put into like a convalescent home, and then again died shortly before the 60th anniversary in July. So it was amazing to get to meet him, and I wish I got to spend more time. I spent probably about 2.5 hours at his house setting up the interview, just chatting with him. His wife, his family showed up too, and then talking to her, his wife Marie, and his daughter was there as well. So incredible experience for me, and I'm so grateful that I was able to do it. But yeah, I feel like Pumpsie should have much more recognition than he does. And much more knowledge, especially for sports fans here in Boston and fans of the Red Sox. I think that has come along, but just like Alex Cora talks about with Roberto Clemente back home in Puerto Rico, you got to really prop up your heroes, and a lot more can always be done for some of the things that they had to endure and what they meant to not only the organization and sports, but to the broader population.
Yeah, no, all that is so very true. I'm glad that we're able to, have you on as kind of a almost firsthand source of somebody that got to communicate with them. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that we may have missed on, or you just wanted to point out about himself or his career or anything like that?
Um, no, I think we covered it pretty good. But I mean, it's just like again, Pumpsie was a good ball player. He was a solid ball player, and he had some of the best years of his life, major league wise, with the Red Sox. But what it says in Baseball Reference is just only a part of the story. To again, just the type of man he was and what he meant to the organization, and then breaking the Red Sox color barrier 12 years after Jackie Robinson did. So, it was just great to spend some time with him and get to know him, and the stories were fantastic. And I think I still have the My Story. We did My Story is what the series was called, and I think it's still on my Instagram in my reels, like the whole thing. So if anybody wants to go watch it, it still exists there. All three segments of something that we didn't cover, but great story to be told. And if you want to be knowledgeable about it, I think you should check it out. But yeah, I think that's about it. And I did somewhere in my collection over here. I did have him sign a baseball for me, so I may have the last Pumpsie Green signed ball. I'm not sure if he signed many more after that, but I may have the last one ever. And it's one of those things that I hold with pride. So pretty cool to have that.
No, that's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on here. I appreciate your time. No, you're a busy guy with everything. But is there anything that you want to promote or before we wrap things up here?
Yeah, well, spring training is on the way, so be sure to check us out on NESN. I think the first game we have is the Northeastern, the exhibition on February 17th. So watch that.
21st, I think.
24. Okay, yeah. See, I'm all over the place, but it's coming.
I'm excited, so trust me. Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be good, and I'm doing TGL Golf League right now in West Palm, which has been incredible. So if you're so inclined, tune into that. Tiger Woods is a part of it. Rory McIlroy, Boston Common Golf has its own team I'm representing with this hat here today. So check that out. Support it. I think it's a great television product, something you might enjoy because everybody can't make it down to the SoFi Center. So check that out. And, I'll be seeing everybody around. I'm all over the place, it seems.
Yeah, well, no, we'll definitely make sure that we say hi at Fenway again. But yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, watch NESN. We don't need to tell any Red Sox fans that, but glad that we were able to get this story out here. And for anybody listening, obviously, feel free to share. Ratings and all that type of stuff definitely help us out a lot. So anything goes is appreciated. But Jahmai, thank you again, and I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon, and hope the Red Sox have a good season.
Yeah, that's what we're all hoping for. Thanks for having me. Very much appreciated.
A little Irish in your blood, a little Polish in your name, a little Boston in your